Hello. I know the title is clickbait. I just wanted to get you here into the video, but I have some thoughts about Kryptos' K4 puzzle, and I wanted to share them here. So, basically, I have been approaching Kryptos and K4 from an artistic standpoint as opposed to like a mathematic or cryptographic standpoint. I think that the Berlin clock is not the math set theory clock, but that it's the world clock. And I'm going to explain why. So, basically, here are two clues. One is Berlin clock, that's why we're here. Two is east-northeast. So Jim Sanborn is anathemath, as he says. He doesn't like math. It's not something that is a part of his worldview, which is why I think like doing the base 5 set theory clock is just against who he is and how he sees the world. And so thinking about all of his work and how a lot of his work is based off of invisible forces, I started to investigate more into that. So, looking at the world clock in Berlin via Wikipedia, on October 7th, 1989, opposition political groups formed a demonstration which began at the world clock and ended at the Palace of the Republic. The state responded by arresting over 1,200 of the protesters. 33 days later, the Berlin Wall fell. I think that considering the pieces about invisible human forces, revolution is a gigantic invisible human force. The protests showed that maybe the Germans, the Berliners, the donuts, are living in a police state. But if a police state tries to use intimidation on its people and it doesn't work, that means that the police state doesn't work. And this example shows that let the protests continue moving on within Germany. And that feels more like an invisible human force than like set theory does. The second clue, this journey that they took going from the world clock to the Palace of the Republic, the world clock is east-northeast of the Palace of the Republic, also lining up with the second clue. I think it's also important to look into what Sanborn, his worldview on and what he is trying to show through art. So it's always been about invisible forces, but his work in the 80s was about invisible forces of nature. So magnetism, gravity. We know all his previous work has lodestones in it. Lodestones are created by forces of nature. They're created by lightning. They have magnetic properties. And here on Wikipedia, lodestones, which in Middle English means course stone or leading stone, comes from the now obsolete meaning of load, as in journey or way. So Kryptos has one of these lodestones out in the little strata out front with K0, but Kryptos isn't about natural forces. It's about human forces. So I don't think the lodestone is supposed to be about magnetism, even though it's magnetizing the needle of the compass. If we're going with the meaning of load as journey or way, if you're standing at the world clock, the way to the Palace of the Republic is the direction that the lodestone is making the needle point. It is the journey that the protesters took to advance and continue the revolution that took down the Berlin Wall. Considering some timelines here, there is some fuzziness about when this could have happened. This thing in 1989, I don't know if it took place before Kryptos was installed or before it was finalized, or maybe it happened after Sanborn had already cut out the letters from the copper sheet. But it's also possible that it was an inspiration for K4's plaintext. And from the most recent article that came out, Sanborn said that he was driving back from Arizona. When you're driving back, you listen to the radio, and maybe on the radio he heard something talking about these revolutions that were happening in Berlin at that time, or a recount of it maybe afterwards. So timelines could line up, but also could be very wrong. Finally, I'm not a cryptographer. I don't know any of this analysis stuff. That's kind of why I'm making this video, to give my art ideas to someone that knows how to do like bigrams or whatever. That's all I got. Artistically and aesthetically, I like the W split idea. I think that if you take like every alternating thing and like put the odds and then the evens next to each other, this sentence structure feels more human if you're trying to read out the plain text of like how this revolution would go to somebody else. it makes more sense that it's like the Berlin clock is east northeast of the palace than having there be like a lot more space in between those two words. Also, like maybe you could see W as like wall for Berlin Wall, and then the alternating plain text chunks are like east and west of the wall, right? Maybe something like that. This is also this is just vibes at this point. But I figured that even though it's like looser and fuzzier than doing frequency analysis or something else discrete that would help with the decryption process, I don't know. Nothing else has worked. So I just figured that it would be worth exploring. I didn't see a lot of other talk in either of the other Kryptos discussion boards where people have been bouncing around ideas. So here we are. Hopefully this helps someone out. Yeah, thank you, Jim Sanborn, for your work in giving us this mystery to uncover and bash our heads against in the most loving way for the past 35 years.